Hey, I'm Larissa from Beekeeping Made Simple, and this video is about the things I wish I knew about honeybees and beekeeping before I became a beekeeper. Some of these are, big things to prevent your hive from dying, which, my first 3 hives died in my first 2 years. And some of them are just like, oh, how come no one told me that? That would have been nice to know, kinds of things. These are things that I learned on my own as a hobby beekeeper, as well as things that I learned working for a 4th generation beekeeper who had a commercial apiary with 4,000 hives. The first tip I give people is to start with a Langstroth style beehive. Now, if you live in the United States, I say that because it is the most common beehive. And if you're looking for equipment, if you are looking for help, if you're looking to shadow a beekeeper, ask questions from people in your bee association, find a mentor, it's a lot easier when you are using the most common style equipment. If you live in another country where a different style beehive is the most common, go with that style beehive. Second thing is queen spotting. I had a hard time finding the queen my first couple of years, and it wasn't until I started working for a commercial apiary that I learned the proper way to spot a queen. So I do have a queen spotting video. Here's the link for it. It's also in the video description below, where I give you all of my queen spotting tips. But first, when you first get your beehives, make it one of your top priorities. When you're getting that package of bees or that nuke and the hive is small, it's going to be a lot easier to spot that queen bee than when the hive has 30 or 40,000 bees in it come summer. So every single time you open your hive, you want to make it one of your jobs to try to spot the queen. Because once you get a hang of it and you get to know what she looks like, it'll be a lot easier to spot her later on in the year when you have to spot her. The second thing is that you want to pull out the frame and spend 5 seconds looking for your queen. If you do not see her on that side of the frame, flip it over and look on the other side. Spend 5 seconds looking for the queen there. Then you can look at other stuff. You can spend more time looking at the other side. But some queens, slow moving, they don't care. They're in the hive, outside. Some queens are skittish. And when you pull the frame out, she's going to start running. She's going to hide under bees. You're going to look on one side. She's going to go to the other. You're going to flip it around. She's going to go to the other side. You're going to do this like 5 times. She's going to flip from side to side. Trust me, it's happened to me many, many times. So if you spend just 5 seconds, count to 5, flip it over, look at the other side, you have a much, much, much greater chance of spotting your queen bee. Speaking of queen bees, another thing that I didn't learn until 5th year, 7th year, I don't know, it had been a while, but I didn't know until a while that you should not hold a queen cell upside down. If you think that the hive might be making a queen, or know that they're making a queen, or you see a queen cell in your hive, if you want that queen to hatch and be a viable queen that can go out on her mating flight and come back and start laying eggs, you do not want to hold that queen cell upside down. So when you're pulling out a frame and you see a queen cell on it, do not go like this. Look at it like this. And then look at the other side that way. Do not turn it upside down. Next thing, very important, and will not cause your hive to die, but will just cause you a lot of aggravation, is remembering bee space. This is especially important in the Langstroth style beehives. Langstroth and a few other people invented this style beehive around the same time, but he is the one credited and named the hive. He realized that there was a space in between honeycomb. And this space we call bee space, and it's about 3/8 of an inch. And when you have this much space between comb, that's just enough space for the bees to get through. So when you put your frames in your boxes or your top bar hive or whatever you're using, you want your frames to have that bee space between them. If you put, say, 9 frames in your 10 frame box or 7 frames in your 8 frame box, and you allow more space than having your frames right up against each other, your bee space is going to be bigger. And why do you care about this? Well, if there is more than 3/8 of an inch, your bees are going to make comb where you don't want them to make it. I do have a video, here's the link to it, on what happened to me. I had some hives at this resort and I just ran out of equipment. I'm driving like an hour to get out there. I didn't have an extra box, but the bees needed space and I didn't want them to swarm. So actually I had a box, I just didn't have enough frames for the box. So I threw the box on. I had like 2 or 3 frames I threw in there. A lot of wide open space, and the bees built a whole bunch of comb everywhere. I have a video of what I did and how I got the comb out and cleaned up everything. But if you leave like 9 frames in a 10 frame box, what they're going to do is build a cross comb or a burr comb, and they're going to start to build comb, like say off of the front of your frame instead of in the center. Or you might see it if you have foundation, they're going to build the comb off of the foundation as opposed to building the comb on the foundation. So Langstroth realized that if you have 3/8 of an inch between your frames, the bees will build comb in the frame and you can pull the frame out, inspect it, harvest honey, put it back without damaging the comb. And that is the beauty of the Langstroth style hive, is the movable frames. Before that, people weren't inspecting their hives, they were just cutting comb out and harvesting honey and just destroying lots of comb in the process. So thank you Langstroth and everyone else who realized that bee space exists and use this to your advantage. Your hives will die. It's a part of beekeeping. Not every hive is going to survive. There is nothing that you can do as a beekeeper that would keep every single beehive alive forever. There just isn't. You could do everything perfect, but you can't control nature. And you can't control the genetics of the beehive that you're getting. You can only work with what you're given. And so you have to accept, even if you lose your first hive or your second or your third hive survives, there will be a time when a hive will die. In nature, about 1 in every 3 hives survives, which is why bees swarm so often. For the average beekeeper, you should shoot for a 70% survival rate and accept that 30% of your hives probably will not survive an entire year. It's important to just be realistic and understand that that's going to happen. You're also going to squish bees. It doesn't mean that when you get your first package of bees and that first bee that you squish, like, you know, it doesn't matter to you. It's okay to still be upset, to feel bad, but it is going to happen. And it is a part of beekeeping. Next, you can put a shallow frame in a deep box. Only if it is the first box of your beehive. But if you are using a Langstroth style hive and that first box on your hive is a deep and you do not have any more deep frames, you can put shallow and medium frames in that deep box. Once you're adding your second box up and every other box after that, you have to have the right size frame for that box, or bees will probably build comb off of the frame and connect it to the box below. But when first starting out with that first deep box, it is okay to have any size frame you want in that deep box. Speaking of equipment and boxes, if I was to start beekeeping all over again and had to buy all of my equipment, because I got some free stuff from people here and there, but if I had to buy all of my equipment, I would buy all medium boxes, medium frames, and that would be it. Next, do not buy a fabric veil or any cheap beekeeping equipment for that matter. You'll see a whole lot of them on Amazon and you're like, why is this $40 and this is $15? I have had hive tools snap in half, literally, and I have just hated every single veil I got that was fabric. Now you'll get some veils. I got one from daydant.com that was wire mesh, and then I got one from Man Lake that was fabric. No, it was Amazon, and it was fabric. It was the whole jacket, and the veil part was fabric, and it rips, and it was broken fairly fast. I put duct tape over it, but you don't really want duct tape over your veil. That's not ideal. If you're buying the suit, then see if you can get a suit that has the wire in the veil part, because it will last a lot longer. When becoming a beekeeper, one of the things you are turning into is a scientist. you are breeding bees, whether you like it or not. Because bees are constantly wanting to swarm and reproduce. That's how we have more colonies. That's how they account for colony loss over winter. And that is something that you have to acknowledge as the beekeeper. So what this means is that when your bees are getting ready to swarm, you can let them, but if you live have your hives in a residential area or an area where there's enough places where, they could go somewhere where people are going to then try to kill them and have them removed, that's not being a responsible beekeeper. What you should do is split your hives, and that means you have 2 smaller beehives instead of 1 large beehive. So you're essentially swarming the bees before they swarm themselves. And that is the ideal way to keep bees. But there is a but here. Not every hive has good genetics, and it is really important as a backyard beekeeper to figure out where the good genetics are and where they are not. And this might be the most important thing that you do as a beekeeper, because at first I thought being a beekeeper was helping the bees. Oh, I'm going to get a beehive, I'm going to help the bees. That doesn't help the bees. Just buying a hive and keeping it alive, that's not helping the bees. And then I worked for a commercial apiary, and I said these backyard beekeepers are all wrong. They are not helping the bees because half the time their hive dies. How is that helping anything? There's no more bees. The bee population is not greater because people have 1 or 2 hives in their backyard. It's the commercial apiaries, the ones with thousands of hives. They're the ones that are keeping the bee population alive. And then I got to know the queen breeders, the ones that are producing, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of queens throughout the year, monthly. And then I realized that it actually is the backyard beekeepers who have the potential to really make a difference to help the honeybee population. But only if we help breed the right kind of bee, because genetics are really important. And in nature, the bees with the strongest genetics, the ones that are dealing with varroa mites on their own, the ones that are bringing in lots of honey and swarming to break that varroa mite brood cycle and surviving, those are the ones that need to survive. The weak hives, yeah, you can feed them and you can keep them alive, but that is not helping nature by keeping those genetics around. You want to keep the genetics around the strong hives, the bees that are dealing with stresses of nature all on their own without human intervention. So as a backyard beekeeper, it is our job to 1, monitor for varroa mites. Do a mite test on each hive. Choose a different hive every month and see what their mite levels are. Because if one hive has high mite levels and the other hive doesn't, the hive with the low mite levels is the one with good genetics. You want to see how well are the bees bringing in honey all on their own without you having to feed them. Yeah, you can feed bees early in the spring when you first get them, but then come mid to late spring, summertime, you should not have to feed them. You want to see what bees are bringing in all on their own without your intervention. You want to see what bees are lazy and what bees aren't lazy. You want to see what bees are growing, which ones have the good genetics, and those are the bees that you want to split. Now you can actually technically split every beehive you have, because you can still use the bees from hives that aren't doing well. But what you don't want to do is let them make their own queen, because that's how their genetics get passed down to more and more generations. So when you have really strong hives, you want to let those hives make their own queen, take eggs, put them in hives without queens so they can make more queens. If you have queen cells in the hive, put those other queen cells in splits. And the hives that don't do well, you want to split them, but buy a queen from somewhere else. You want to catch swarms, do cutouts, put your name on the list at the local beekeeping association so you can go down with them to do cutouts or catch swarms. You want to experiment with buying queens and packages of bees and nukes from apiaries all over your area. Do not have them shipped in, but buy them from your area. Bring in as many genetics as you can and work on building an apiary with stellar genetics, because that is how us as hobby backyard beekeepers are going to help the honeybee population. Not just by having bees and keeping every single hive alive, but helping the ones with good genetics thrive and reproduce. Okay, now on to some less wordy ones. If you have a queen cell in your hive, when you're opening it, leave it. Don't open it for a while. It's about 16 days from egg to hatching. If the cell is a decent size so that you can see it, she's probably at least 7 days old. If it's capped, she's at least 9 days old. You want to give it till you think she is definitely at least 16 days old, plus another week. You do not want to open a beehive if the queen could potentially be going on her mating flight. The odds are low that you're opening the hive when she's going on a mating flight, but that's the way life works. Things happen when you don't want them to happen. So leave it alone, because if she comes back from her mating flight and her hive looks different because now the lid is off and the boxes are off and there's a beekeeper standing there, she might go to a neighboring hive and they're going to kill her when she arrives. So leave those hives alone. They will be just fine if you do not open them for a couple of weeks. Next, lazy beekeeping is 100 times better than over-eager beekeeping. My first year, I always wanted to check in on the hive, see what they were doing, pull all their frames out. The next year, I got a job working somewhere that was an hour and a half away. I ended up renting an apartment there so I didn't have to drive so much, and I didn't check my hives as much. You know, maybe once, maybe twice a month. And they did a million times better me leaving them alone. Bees actually, they don't like you. You're not their friend. They're not going to be happy to see you. They don't want their lid taken off the hive. They don't want frames taken out. They really, really hate it when you pull brood out and you disturb the brood nest. So the less time you spend opening a hive, 20 minutes is great, or less, the better. And you do not want to open up a hive more than once a week. Once a week to once every other week is really best when it comes to spring and summer beekeeping. Now on to location. I looked at a whole bunch of different places to put my bees my first year. I was living in Philadelphia, West Philly, so not like right downtown Center City, but about a mile west of Center City. And I thought about putting the bees on the rooftop of the parking garage next to the building I lived in, which was super convenient. But I also had a friend that worked at a retreat center about a 30-minute drive outside of the city from where I lived, and a lot more flowers. And there even was a guy with a wood shop. They had old beekeeping equipment they said I could use, and I chose to still put them in the building next to the building I lived in. You can put your bees at places that are most convenient to you if you like, but if you start to see that the hive is not growing, you've tested for mites and the mite levels are low, but they're just not bringing in much honey, instead of blaming the queen, which is what everybody does, everyone blames the queen for all the problems in the hive, consider moving them. Before you even get your bees, you should really have a backup location, just in case a neighbor gets angry, someone gets stung, it just doesn't work out well in your area. Have another place to put them. Grass is not helpful for bees. Grass is a food desert, so suburbs tend to be really bad places for bees. And I found that the city was not great for bees either. There's a lot of talk about urban beekeeping and a lot of people that want to keep bees in cities. My bees did okay, but they did not bring in anywhere near as much honey as other beginner beekeepers I was talking to at the Bee Association that had their bees outside the city. Your queen could be just fine. Your bees' genetics could be just fine. Maybe they don't have a mite problem, but if there's just not enough food for them, they're not going to grow much. They're not going to bring in much. And without much food coming in, the queen's not going to lay much because there's nothing to feed them. That's irresponsible for the queen to have all these babies if she isn't, there's no food to feed them. So before you go killing your queen and putting a new one in, you really want to consider the location. And especially if you're in the suburbs or the city, there's a good chance that the location is the problem. Now, maybe one hive is doing great and the other hive is not so great. That could still be a location problem, because I had my bees in South Kona and there's a lot of commercial beekeepers down there. I put my bees all over the place in South Kona, and I would have, say, like if I had 10 hives in an area, 1 or 2 of those hives would do great, and that would be the majority of my honey harvest. One hive would just be like a brood box for a year and not do anything. And the rest of the hives would be 1 brood box, 1 full box, just brood. And the second box would be half brood, half honey, 1/3 brood, 2/3 honey. Maybe a super on top that had a little bit inside. And that would be the way it was until I moved my bees 20 minutes down the road into a different town, and they did amazing, and I brought in so much more honey. And the location makes a huge difference. If you only have 2 hives, it can be hard to tell if it's the location or the bees' genetics, if one hive is strong and one hive isn't. But if you have 5 hives and 1 hive is strong and all the rest aren't, and there's no mite problems, then there's a good chance that it is your location. And not only is this in terms of bringing in lots of honey, maybe you don't care how much honey you bring in, but beekeeping is so much more fun and enjoyable when your bees are healthy and happy, when there is food together and they're out busy doing what they want to be doing. The bees are not angry when you open the hive. They're busy. They don't care that you're opening the hive. You can open the hive with no gloves on, in a t-shirt and shorts, like you'll see me in some of these videos. They don't care, because a lot of the foragers are out and the bees are happy and busy. And when the bees are busy and they're happy and they're bringing in lots of food, beekeeping is just a lot easier. It's a lot more enjoyable. There's a lot less problems, and the beekeeper is going to enjoy it as well. Next, every hive is different, and it doesn't matter how many years you keep bees, you are always going to see different things. I had a student once say in my beekeeping class, "I just want you to tell me what to do." And I wish it would make teaching beekeeping and making my online beekeeping class so much easier if I could just tell you what to do, but I can't. Just like in my Queen Choose Your Own Adventure chart, that's the best I can do, is say, what are you seeing in the hive? If it's this, go this way. If it's this, go that way. Because there are so many variables, not only with beekeeping, but in nature. And so the best thing I can compare beekeeping to is being a mom. Because you have one child and you start to get a hang for, okay, how you deal with nap time and tantrums and feeding them. And then you have another kid and their personality is totally different. And what worked for one kid doesn't work for the other kid. And what was really easy for them is now really hard. And it is the same thing with beekeeping. There is no one solution for a problem. And one hive might do really well when it comes to one area, and another hive is going to do really poorly. And so as the beekeeper, you're never going to think that you've got it all. Except for maybe your first year, and then you're going to realize that you're wrong when you get another hive and they're totally different. Next, you're probably not going to harvest any honey your first year. And if you do, you probably shouldn't have, but you did anyway. Also, on the subject of honey, water is honey's arch nemesis. So whenever you are going to harvest honey, wash jars out to put honey in, anything that has to do with honey, make sure everything is dry. I like to wash it at least 1 full day in advance so that everything thoroughly dries all on its own, and the strainers and everything, all those little crevices, that everything dries up so that I don't have to deal with any moisture getting into my honey. Okay, I'm coming down to the end of it, just a couple more things. Another one is that you are told when you get a package of bees, your queen is going to be in a cage with a cork in either end. And they always tell you to find the end with the cork with the candy and to pull the cork out and let the bees eat through the candy, and the queen will be released by the bees. Do not do this. This is how queens get killed and you're left queenless. I cannot tell you how many students they just go through queen after queen after queen. And I'm like, wait a second, wait. It's like your third queen this summer. What is going on? Like, what are you doing? And then I tell them either to use a push cage, which is a cage you make. I make it from hardware cloth. I have a link to how to make a push cage in this video. Or you just don't do anything and you put the queen in her cage with all the corks in it into your beehive. After 3 or 4 days, you take her out and you see how she's doing. In this video, at this timestamp, if you click the link, it automatically goes to that part of the video. You don't have to start at the beginning. I show you how to do this part. You look at the queen when you take her out after 4 days, and you see if the bees like her or if they don't. You see their proboscis sticking out, they're trying to feed her. They like her. You can release her. If it looks like they're biting the cage or they're being really angry towards her, or if you shake it lightly or blow on them or take a blade of grass and rub it on the top of the cage and they're not so fast to leave, or you shake the cage and the bees leave and then immediately come back on like there's a strong magnet drawing them to the cage, that's my telltale sign. That means they have not accepted her, put her back in. And then you wait another 4 days or 3 days. And you take it out and you do it again. If they have accepted her, pull the cork out, hold the cage down in the hive, and let the queen slowly walk out. Once she's walked out, close the beehive up as fast as possible. If you can't tell, or she doesn't seem like she's accepted, then you're still going to let her out, but first you're going to take a spray bottle with sugar syrup and that essential oil mix. With the Honeybee Healthy is one brand, but there's lots of brands. You spray every side of every frame in your hive with it. If you have a huge hive, then just do, you know, the frames in the brood boxes, not the honey supers. Changing the scent of the hive, I found, always works to help the queen be accepted. All right, so there you have it, my 13 years of mistakes slash things that I learned later on that I wish I knew before I got started beekeeping. I hope this helps you, and if you have any extra ones that you want to add in, please do so that we can have lots of tips for beginners or, you know, seasoned beekeepers that always like to learn new things. If you're a beekeeper and you've been doing this a while, then you probably are one of those types of people that just loves feeding their brain with new knowledge. Thanks for watching. Check out my online beekeeping course at Beekeeping Made Simple. Use the YouTube code YouTube35 for 35% off. And this includes mentorship, so you are able to email me, set up a chat, a phone call, and we can talk and troubleshoot any problems you might have so that you have someone to go to that knows what they're doing to help you when you're getting started.